We're good. Okay, I'll call to order the Monday, September 15th, 2025 Town of Dudley Government Study Committee. We'll first rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Second item on the agenda, approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the July 21st, 2025 minutes?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Nobody. All unanimous. And we can also approve the August 18th, 2025 minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
I wasn't there, but
You
I
were
can
absent.
abstain.
Okay,
That's right.
well, okay. So 3, and he shouldn't really vote on that, should he?
Mr. Chair, that's up to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Illegal.
All right.
You can't
Okay.
vote on minutes if you want to vote.
All right, okay. 4-0. All right, on to public business. Review of member research. I think we have two members who are ready to present some research or findings that they've come up with. So shall we start with, who shall we start with?
Do you want to start, Brian? Oh, do you
Brian?
want to start, Brian?
Yeah, I
Okay,
guess so.
all right, great.
Yeah, so I looked into, charter governance, and to be honest with the committee, I really didn't know what the term meant, so I had some definite learning to occur. But if you could just go to the next, as of now, Dudley is a non-charter governed town, and what is a charter? Why should we even consider a charter? And kind of drive back to the citizen petitions, and does the charter fit into what they actually were petitioning the town to do? So if you can go, so the non-charter town, how it's governed is basically majority is state general laws, the acceptance statutes, the town bylaws, and any other special acts enacted by the state legislature for Dudley. So the state provides that framework, and the town must operate within those general guidelines provided by the state. So if you can go to the next one. So as I just mentioned, that the state law provides that framework, structure of the government, the roles and responsibilities in general terms. I didn't dig into the specific law as of yet, but I wanted to hear some feedback and direction from the committee before I start going down some of these avenues. But the state provides the financial administration and kind of regulations that the town must follow, public services, and the rules and guidelines for the town meetings. Can you go to the next one, please? And then, if the town has some other additional needs, they can ask for special statutes, but it has to be approved by the state. The local laws or bylaws are enacted by town meeting and regulated procedures, and it also prohibits certain activities. So, again, provide some definition to the roles and responsibilities within the different departments in the framework. It can't be inconsistent with the state of Massachusetts general laws. Again, it's all coming down to, or at least in this example, the governing of the personnel and coordinating activities among the offices. So it gives some framework for the checks and balances of how the town should operate. So yeah, just go on to the next one. And then the special acts of the town, you know, again, the special acts can be granted by the Massachusetts court that aren't covered by the MGL or the statutes. So, you know, there's a lot of flexibility for a non-charter town. If indeed we deem a need to define some appropriate checks and balances in place, we can, you know, we can create those and get approval by the state without going to a charter. So again, I think we're still trying, or at least I'm still trying to figure out what is the crux of the petitions and the citizens' needs to figure out if indeed we can accomplish what the citizens of Dudley are seeking in raising this petition. And so that's the question mark, is can we do it without a charter? And so I think I'm gonna keep coming back to that point, because I think that is the point, right? So the Home Rule Amendment, which is defined by the general laws of Massachusetts, you know, allows the towns, and this is the chapter 43B, allows the towns to create a charter. If the citizens don't believe that the general guidelines of the state are providing enough flexibility and appropriateness of the citizens of the town to govern properly, then they give you the option to go out and create your own charter. So, and so it gives you the option to improve your own self-governance to your situation. And so I think, you know, this site here, we can all go. I mean, you know, I went through and I read through some of them. There's plenty of bylaws that are specific to the town of Dudley that provides and fills in some of the gaps that are, you know, over the years and decades, you know, Dudley has tried to fill in the gaps where it's needed. There's plenty up there for your reading pleasure. Go to the next one. And then again, this just reiterates what the charter is, and you know, distributes powers, duties, responsibilities in a local office. And so, yeah, we can go on to the next one. You know, why a charter? You know, local autonomy, some flexibility, protection of rights, public engagement, innovative. Again, I think that's the appropriate term here. It's an innovative governance tool for the town to implement in the case if they deem it necessary. Going to have a strategic move that can lead to more effective local governance, better protection of individual rights, and a more engaged and informed public. So you know, next steps, as it's all boiling down to, is what improvements are needed. Are there improvements to our current governing model, and can we adopt them without a charter? The initiated review, the two citizens initiated this petition to look at the personnel and town admin bylaws. And I just want to point out, there's a nice legal summary that the town went to get advice and input from Merrick and O'Connell. And you know, as I stated here, it's a good read. And as a result of this, and I'm not certain, Olivia, you probably know, you know, I believe there's 2 articles out there as a response to this petition already, and they have not been codified yet. Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the way I'm interpreting some of my research. So that's where I'm finding. Let me see, is there another slide here? The petition seeks to substantially, so again, this is the crux of the petitions, substantially enhance the authority of the Personnel Board, and in so doing erode the authority of the Board of Selectmen's statutory authority. As noted above, this can only be accomplished by special legislation or a home rule charter. So again, I think that, again, this gets to the matter of the need for a charter or not, and meeting the citizens' petitions. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in my research. I don't have any conclusions other than the fact that I think there's more work to be done in trying to define that. Can we accomplish what we need to? According to legal counsel, it sounds like, you know, you may have to do a charter to accomplish the personnel board and limiting the Board of Selectmen's authority, but that's my interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
We can leave this up if we want to have some conversation on that.
Yeah, I'd love to have, you know, anybody, does that make any sense, or is
I thought
it?
that was a good summary. I know, what was it, the last meeting, Mr. Chairman, we talked about legislation versus a charter. And to the extent that with legislation, you know, you don't have to put it all together. You can just kind of take it piece by piece based upon what the community might want to do. I mean, I think diminishing the authority of the selectmen, in my personal opinion, is not a good idea, because you're just diminishing accountability. However, you know, Dudley has to decide what's right for Dudley. Something I've never seen, but a legislative act or a charter at least doesn't allow you to go to town meeting, you know, with a single posting and completely change the form of government in a bylaw. You know, so, you know, a legislative act or a charter at least gives some relative stability to a form of government, rather than just bylaws. The other thing is, and I know it's in there, I alluded to it, and I had this conversation with somebody just this past week who wasn't too happy with it, that you can, whether it's a charter or an act, you know, that becomes the law of the town. It supersedes statutes that are specifically listed. For instance, you know, you may say that, you know, that the Board of Selectmen has authority over all town buildings and facilities. Now, you might have a statute that, state statute that says, you know, well, the Conservation Commission is responsible for this, so the library trustee is responsible for this. But if you have a legislative act or a charter that says otherwise, it's the charter that supersedes.
Right.
You know,
Is
so
the
it
authority.
basically is state law as it applies to your community, which again gives stability, whether or not people like it or not. You know, just as an example, whether or not your library trustees like the possibility that they don't have, you know, legal control over a library. Again, people may not like that, but you can do those kinds of things in a legislative act. There's a stability to it that you otherwise, you know, you can't do in a bylaw. Because a bylaw can't supersede statute, but a local charter can supersede state laws. That's the intent.
Okay.
So I thought that was a
Good.
good summary.
No, it's a good point for me to understand that fact, because I didn't gain that as of yet in the research about, you know, who's got the charge, they call it the charging order, right? Who takes over, what law do you have to follow in a given situation when you have all these overlapping conditions in place, right?
Yes, I mean, I know you've had some issues over the years, you know, with some of your, like say, Board of Health staff. Well, yeah, it's not uncommon to have a charter or an act that creates an overall appointing authority, which is a town administrator or Board of Selectmen, and appointments are made by their authority in consultation with, you know, but you might have a board or committee that's no longer the appointing authority, even though a statute, you know, either specifically states it or alludes to the fact that, you know, a Board of Health or a planning board appoints their own staff. Well, you know, you you can eliminate that, and that supersedes, you know, state statute.
Okay.
Are there, you just mentioned like 3 or 4 things. The library, let's say, the Board of Health. Does a charter have to touch every single facet of government? What if it
No.
omits something?
Then it defaults to state statute.
Okay. All right. So there could be, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a basic charter versus a more complex charter?
Right, I mean, I know in a prior experience, you know, there was, I worked under a special act which gave the town administrator certain authority, certain appointing authority. For instance, you know, there's certain boards and committees, for instance, a conservation commission or a zoning board of appeals. Now, the zoning board of appeals, and by statute, doesn't have an appointing authority. I think conservation commissions, you know, there's a specific state statute that gives, that says the selectmen appoint conservation commission. So unless you have, you know, a legislative act, or a piece of legislation that changes that, again, the statute is in effect. If you're, again, a prior, experienced, there were, the town administrator had the authority to appoint boards and committees that was not otherwise stated in, so the default for like a zoning board of appeals was, even the finance committee was to the town administrator. Now, whether you think that's a good idea or not, that's a real good discussion.
Mhm.
I'm not even sure, even though I was that person, I don't know that that's a great idea. I really don't think it's a great idea, but not that I didn't appreciate it, okay? So you have to be careful. You have to be careful that you don't leave these holes either, you know, when you, even if you do a legislative act. And, I mean, there's ways to do that, because once it's on paper, once it's an act or it's a charter, well, then you have to go through that process to change it again.
No. Now, that Article 14 and 15 that the town has written, that's a legislative act, or that's just is an article a legislative act?
I'm not as familiar with that as I probably should be.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it.
Was
We
it
throwing
simply
terms around, I wanna make sure, that I
Was it simply a
understand.
petition article to change the bylaws, or was it actually,
Yeah, they were
Yes.
citizens petitions.
okay, changing, because a bylaw does not supersede statute. So a personnel board doesn't have statutory authority, so putting that, a bylaw does not supersede what's in state law. So you could have an act, special act that would cause that to happen, or a charter that would cause that to happen. Whether you think it's a good idea is a different question. So yeah, you could, get a personnel board that effectively has authority that now that would be held by the Board of Selectmen. You could do it in a special act. Now, keep in mind, that has to be approved at the local level, and usually the selectmen are authorized to file, doesn't mean they have to, but they're authorized to file a special act. But that also doesn't mean it's gonna pass the legislature. And you might have, either at the Attorney General level, or, again, legislative level, where it just doesn't get passed. 'Cause
Just hangs up, yeah.
it could. And
Yeah.
If so, even if it does, it could take a couple of years for that to actually happen.
Okay.
So, government moves slow.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And that's not always bad.
right.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
Mhm.
Well, this is a great start. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was a real good summary. Yeah.
So does the committee have any thoughts on next steps on this type of research? I mean, if you don't have to answer it now, you can, but, that's what I'm hoping.
I do, and it's part of my.
Oh, okay.
presentation, So I
Oh,
think.
okay.
I think it's
Yeah.
gonna dovetail really nicely, so.
Okay, all right, awesome.
Yeah, so my question, I was tasked to look at, let me put my.
Are
So,
you starting your presentation? What? Are you starting your presentation? Oh, I had one question for
Oh, go
his.
ahead.
Okay, oh, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't want to sidetrack.
Sure, no.
Could we look into maybe why the other charters were shot down from the past? I would like to see that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any answer for you right now.
Oh, yeah, no,
but,
I figured you
but,
wanted
yeah.
subjects to research if there's one.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some more history to be gathered, right? No, that's definitely one of them. Thank you.
How do we determine that?
Yeah, there's oftentimes more than one reason,
Yeah,
you know, so.
It was defeated, we know it was defeated, but technically that's in the hand of each individual voter, isn't it? I suppose we'd have to find maybe there's some, like Webster Times articles or something around that time that might expand on why it was, do you know if we have anything like?
That, Mr. Chair, would have been my recommendation, is trying to see what was reported on in the Webster Times around then, because I have the final reports of the charter study committees in 1990 and 2003, but I don't really think I have any follow-up literature that says, here's why it failed.
No postmortem. Okay.
We could interview some of the members of those committees perhaps as an option as well, just get their impressions.
Perhaps. That's a good idea. Okay.
Or I assume, obviously, these pass town meeting to get to the ballot box. I mean, you would have to do that to get to a vote. So I'm just, I guess, I could presume that any naysayers at a town meeting would also, that could have that could indicate a huge piece of why it may have been defeated, whatever the sentiment may have been on town meeting, the anti-charter sentiment. I don't know who wants to go back and look at town meetings, but.
How good is the documentation from these timeframes?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I had internet right now, I'd be able to go through my files and see if I could see anything. I think I have town meeting minutes dating back to the early 2000s. I'm not sure about the 90s. I don't think those are digitized.
Mhm.
That might require someone to go to the town clerk's office and look at physical printings of them. But
Before they were recorded, if someone got up at a town meeting and asked a question or made a statement, were they written down or?
back in the 80s and 90s, I'm not sure what their process was. Pre-computers
Right.
wasn't my time frame.
What years are we talking about?
90 and 2000?
1990 and 2003, I believe.
2000.
Two very different
2004.
times.
Yeah.
And I mean, how applicable would be 1990? I mean, even 2003, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem it though,
Well, maybe we'll find the reasons universal. I don't know. All right, thank you. Okay,
Any
good?
questions? or
I'm good.
comments? Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah,
Okay,
Robin, please.
sorry. So my question was sort of adjacent to Brian's question, which was to look at whether Dudley's current governance model, our Board of Selectmen and town administrative structure, continues to serve the town effectively, and to explore the benefits and challenges of this setup. So I confirmed an important starting point, just like Brian did, is that we do not have a town charter at current, and we operate under Massachusetts law and our local bylaws. Not an unusual setup for a town of our size. But what I decided to do was to take a look at our current bylaws in our system and compare it against a charter-based town manager model. And so with the help of some artificial intelligence, we did a comparison of Dudley current bylaws and then, what is a charter and what would it do? And so this provides some comparison as to what our bylaws-based system stacks up and how it stacks up against a charter-based model. And in general, it's sort of what Brian had mentioned, is that, the charter-based model is more codified. It is a little less flexible than a bylaw system. It's harder to change a charter, but it's a little more stable. But this chart, as you can look through, and I'm not gonna go through every line item, but you definitely can refer to this. It looks at each function and feature of the bylaws and sort of gives a summary of, what the differences might be under a charter-based model. Just to look at the personnel system, right now, the bylaws have a personnel board that advises on benefits, grievances, and the town administrator acts as the personnel director for day-to-day HR. In a charter system, the town manager would have direct HR authority, and the personnel board would be advisory only, or maybe eliminated entirely. So that is, one key difference between a bylaw or a charter. Any questions on this? Does this make sense to everyone?
I think, the personnel system, if I may, that was the citizens petition issue, wanting to grant more authority to the personnel board. So if I look at this, the charter question, it would say charter would not satisfy the petition request. Just a observation.
Other comments, questions? So my central question, becomes, does Dudley's bylaws based structure support effective, efficient, and accountable town government? Right, that's sort of the central question that we have to answer. And the possible outcomes could be, we make no changes, right? We could update bylaws in targeted areas. We could make recommendations for process or structural kind of recommendations, or we could draft and adopt a charter, right? So we really have a lot of different ways that we can pursue this task. What we need to do, though, in order to decide what possible outcomes we want to do, is to do a gap analysis. And so this would be my recommendations for a gap analysis process. This is one way we could potentially move forward with this work. If we map out the different governance areas and then ask the diagnostic questions, so what is it that we need to learn about those different government areas, gather some evidence, so whether it be interviews, we've talked about surveying the constituents of the town. We could do peer comparisons in all of these different areas, and then we can document the gaps. So I think what we have now is, we know that we've had 2 articles that wanted to extend the personnel board, and there was one other, a citizen's petition that was also looking for changes. So we know that there was some angst in at least a portion of the citizens of the town in a couple different areas. But what we really don't know is what the gaps truly are. I'm not sure we have a good handle on what's actually working and what doesn't work at this time. So the point of steps 3 and 4 would be to really get to the bottom of that and decide, where are there gaps between what is efficient and effective, and where are the pain points for the constituents. And from there, we can build recommendations. Is it a charter, or is it bylaw updates, or is it some process changes within?
Or special act.
Or a special act.
That's right.
Special act.
Can't take that off the board, right?
Okay. Yeah, or special act. Okay. I didn't understand fully, so it was good to have that discussion when I made this, so that's great. So these would be, these were recommended key governance areas, like things that we may want to focus in on. So, what is the select board authorities versus the town administrator's role, personnel and HR, obviously, given the citizens petitions. financial oversight, which was the other petition, I believe, that came in, Article 14 was that one. So I think that's another area where we'll probably get some significant feedback. Legislative process, and then accountability mechanisms. So those are some buckets that we might want to consider, digging into in that information gathering stage that might help us determine where we want to go. These are some examples of what I would call diagnostic questions that we could consider, that could guide that information gathering. Does the town administrator have the sufficient authority for day-to-day operations? Is the HR and the systems currently functioning fully and efficiently? Those questions may help us in diagnosing and making recommendations on the HR and the other personnel questions that we have outstanding. When we're looking at town meeting laws, do they ensure participation and transparency? And when we're looking at administration, we can look at, are the roles clear and complementary? And then this is just a summary of there's a document here that gives a little bit more detail and this is all in our SharePoint site, our OneDrive. So just some other potential questions that we can edit or modify as we're going along this process, if we choose to take this process. And then I would recommend using some type of a tool or a worksheet so that we have some structured input. This is what this would look like. It is a spreadsheet where we could all kind of input our questions, and we would all make a recommended rating between 1 to 5 on how effective this particular area is working, and then give comments and examples, and then document potential solutions. So if each one of us kept sort of this sort of log or notes, we would be able to assess, our independent and then collective thoughts on, how effective each area of the government is, what evidence we have to support it, and what recommendations we might want to go forward with on that. So we could add special act to that column, as I've learned something new today.
This Excel spreadsheet you proposed that we use as a tool ourselves?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, this would be a tool that we could use as we're collecting data and making recommendations, to guide our recommendations. Yeah, and what we're looking for is to capture gaps. What are the tensions? What are the strengths? And we could know whether the issues, I just went over all this, and use it for a basis for a final recommendation. I think that's all I had. So I'd love to have some feedback and questions on this.
I like the gap analysis approach. That's probably really good.
I agree.
Yeah, I like the way you structured it, instead of having us kind of random thoughts on such things. The question is, how do you get to the answers on each individual? How do you map out each step in a way that's tangible?
Does, yeah.
So-
So we'd have to
Yeah.
do some additional work on each step.
I expect you, Robin, to publish a book when this is all
I like
done,
it.
okay? Yeah. No, I mean, it's an elephant, right? How you gonna eat it, right?
Right.
And this is a good way to kind of carve it up a bit.
But those questions are answered by talking to town officials, talking to the public, debating amongst ourselves.
Correct.
unlimited number of areas where we can search for those answers.
Correct,
It's just
correct.
a tool to quantify.
Right, it's a tool to quantify. We would gather the evidence, ask those questions, but we would be gathering the evidence from our constituents and from, other
Right.
research.
Yeah, that's great.
So what's the first step?
Well, what's the first step? I think it's to really map the governance areas and see, like, are these the right areas that we want to research? I think they line up in some way with all the assignments that we've already had. I believe that we had someone looking at HR, some HR materials, and I don't know if we've kind of divided up this way, but
So this is digging into each bucket has people, and they have roles and responsibilities, and then,
and they have bylaws that govern them and statute that
so
governs.
we need
each
to
area.
boil all of that into a job description and compare that to an existing job description, and then compare that to the state laws.
Mm-hmm.
And is everything covered, is the ultimate question, right? I mean, I'm just trying
Right.
to think out
Right.
loud here, but
So,
I'm just,
so we determine 10 things that an executive
right, role of
role should
responsibility.
do.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
compare it to the actual job description and see if they all match. Maybe our list, maybe there's 2 missing, or maybe they have 2 things that we missed. We could add, yeah, that's a
Right.
good point.
Or we ask in our survey, this would guide maybe our survey to, the citizens is, we could have certain sections. Not every section would probably have questions for, everyone, but, we could look around, we could say, do you feel that the financial oversight is adequate? I mean,
Right.
that's a big question, but,
Appropriately staffed,
appropriately
or-
staffed,
right,
or
right.
enough information, or, we can dig into those and get some specific questions underneath of each of these that can guide the information gathering.
Yeah.
Whether it be survey of constituents, whether it be talking with administrators of other towns, whether it be talking to employees and people in
Yeah,
the
department heads,
organization.
obviously,
Yeah,
critical.
the department heads, right.
Do we ask people 6 times for a short list of questions, or do we ask once for a long list?
I would suggest a once and have, each area might you'd really have to be very careful as to what the questions are when you're surveying. You want to make sure that you keep it short enough, but robust enough to get the information that you want.
Right.
So we would want, maybe a couple questions for each area so that you don't have, a survey that's 30 questions long. This could help guide the creation of the survey. It could help guide interview scheduling, who and what questions do we want to ask. But this is top level. We would, as we just mentioned, we need to
right,
dig down for more specifics in
Right.
each area.
yeah. No, I mean, this is the next step in the path of figuring out what is needed at the end of the road. You gotta go through this process. I think this is the process that is needed to get some of these tough questions answered.
I guess my question would be, how do we think these key governance areas match up with our charges? I didn't necessarily do a huge comparison on that, but I think they line up fairly well. I know that financial oversight was one specific question that we had around putting the treasurer role, and should it be?
I think, can I just, I'm sorry.
No,
I just wanna.
sure.
One question I have is how each of these departments interact with each other. Is there a slide that could overlap on this, on how they all work together?
I don't know that. That would be a question I think that we would probably want to ask some of the employees, right?
Yeah, no, to your point, it's a big factor.
I think so.
Because how does the structure of the government impact positively or negatively, say, the operation of a police department? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, that's critical stuff.
Yeah, you're looking at these, I mean,
Yeah,
no,
no,
not
no, I hear what
negative,
you're
I'm just saying
saying,
it's
yeah.
a silo in this case, but in actuality, they all commingle on a
Yeah.
day-to-day, and it's,
It's good.
I'm just curious, you know, because when I look at the org chart, it doesn't jump out at me of how they actually interact. You know, the org chart is, you know, it's the same issue, organizational issue in every organization. You know, you got these boxes, but it's always the white space in between the boxes that where things go sideways
And
and,
if it's not obvious or delineated how they should work, people make it work on their own, they figure out a way, maybe it's
Yeah.
inconsistent.
yeah. Yeah, so I'm just curious, on,
Yeah, so we would want to make sure that we had questions for, especially for internal employees around the working between functions.
But if we take something like the personnel and the HR issue, Olivia, you have policies in place that state, do you have policies in state, or does the town have policies in state that say, well, you know, if you have an open rec, you should do this? Or an open requisition for a position, let's say. Does those things exist?
I don't know if there's necessarily a written policy, but there is standard practice.
Okay.
So if there is a vacancy that opens up, I have a procedure that I follow for each of those open positions.
Okay, and is that communicated to everyone in the town hall, in Dudley, everybody's subject to the same procedure?
Yes. Yeah, because I'm notified of any vacancies.
Okay.
Who makes a decision whether to fill or not fill the position?
I would say it depends on the department. I mean, if there was a police officer vacancy, for example, I would ask the police chief if that's a vacancy they were looking to fill.
Okay.
And with police and fire, they are slightly different. Those usually departments, they post for their own vacancies. So they have their own job descriptions and they post it on their police and fire job boards of sorts. But if it was, say, an administrative position in here, I'll use, I'm not sure, like assistant town clerk as an example. If our assistant town clerk retired or resigned and there was a vacancy in that office, I would ask the town clerk, is this a vacancy you want filled? Is this necessary to the daily function of your office? And considering that it's like,
What department would ever say no to that question?
right.
So ultimately, somebody has to make a decision whether or not it's a
Mhm.
good idea to fill or to consolidate or combine or.
Right.
Who makes that decision?
It really depends on the department, because you have authority lying, or at least with the town clerk's office, you have your elected town clerk. So I think it would really depend if that town clerk felt she was able to complete all the work, just her. If it could be reduced to a part-time position instead of a full-time position. Budgetarily, what can we afford? Because that's always the constraint about adding new positions is, do we have the budget for it?
Can the town, just in this example, can the town clerk go forward and fill a position even without some approval from a different level of government, or just?
You're really getting me with these hypotheticals.
I'm just talking technically, the way.
I know,
So if you had a position in any department and you thought that could be combined with a position in a different department, that can't be done right now?
we do have several combined department positions, and those were consolidated a few years ago after an outside consultant was brought in to sort of study the structure here, the structure of our administrative assistants. So we do have some combined administrative assistants, but the assistant town clerk is not currently one of those combined positions. That is solely a town clerk.
And I'm just
department.
taking it as an example, I'm
Yeah.
not picking on anybody here.
But there's also a difference if it's an elected position versus a hired position,
Right.
right?
And I don't want to speak incorrectly, I would really have to look into it. If for some
Right.
reason the elected town clerk wanted to fill the assistant town clerk position and for some reason was told no, could she go ahead and fill that anyway? Ooh, that's a really interesting hypothetical.
Yeah.
I would have to look and see.
I think we have a comment from the audience.
Good evening, Rich. Sorry. Good evening, Rich Carmignani, Treasurer Collector. There was a vacancy in the Treasurer Collector's office from April of '23 until November of '23. So the answer is my advocacy did not get that position filled. It had to be the Board of Selectmen in concert with, I think some of these are on and we're getting feedback. So the answer is no. I tried to get that position filled, and for 8 months, it was something that wasn't going to be consolidated or reorganized into something. It was me and one other person for that period of time.
Rich, what specifically held it up? Did the Board of Selectmen specifically say we're not?
There
gonna
was
fill it?
no plan to do it, and this would dovetail into the three attempts at an override, and I was not able to get that full-time position filled. So the specific question you asked, could the elected person go through and hire independently? The answer is no. Ironically, the ability for, I'll give you an example of the fire chief to go through and get someone to fill a slot for a per diem was allowed to do that. So little difference as far as how things are worked as far as hiring people. Now, I'll also raise my hand and say the appointment of an assistant treasurer or assistant collector is to the Board of Selectmen. So were I to push things, an unbenefited person in there, not under those two subheadings, probably could have got somebody in there, but the idea was we're looking to get a person that filled those two roles. So,
Thank you for that, yeah.
and
And I could maybe add, I think, to the fact that I believe state statute doesn't specifically authorize a treasurer or a collector to appoint an assistant.
yep,
The statute governing town clerks does allow a town clerk to appoint an assistant.
Right.
So now you're dealing with statutes,
Right,
and that's what it comes down to. So
right.
do you want to live by those statutes, or do you want to,
Right.
that's a question, because what does it do if you have flexibility? So that's a very good point,
Right.
thank you.
Right.
You know,
And a charter or
Yeah.
a special act could
Yeah,
change that,
right.
right? Just to kind of circle back
Sure.
to
sure.
the levers.
Right. But at
right?
least to some extent, though,
Yeah.
there is, through the Board of Selectmen, some ability
Right.
to make those.
There is a charging order on
Yeah.
making those type of
Yeah.
decisions.
back, may I, Mr. Chairman, back to the original question, is there a policy in place for filling vacancies that wouldn't otherwise organizationally be redrawn? Instead of going to the ends of the earth, an internal policy solves the problem as well. And it would be a policy drafted internally. It wouldn't be something that needed to be brought in from the state. And again, I think the example of the assistant town clerk is a good one. You would never want to have an election coming up where the competency of the office staff and the town clerk would ever be brought into. So the idea for the betterment of the citizens and the public image. I could speak all night, but thank you.
Thank
I
you.
wanted
Thank
to
you.
bring that up.
Thank you.
So this brings up an interesting question, though. Is our charge only things that should be enacted at a town meeting or a bylaw or a new charter? Or are we recommending like a policy change inside the town hall at that point?
I would say, personally, I would say that would be no. I think this is a government study,
Right.
not a, which is, beyond, that's the bigger picture. I think that interdepartmental policies and procedures,
But if it affects one of those 6 things,
Right.
or how they're interrelated, doesn't that matter?
Well, I think, and my opinion is that it matters to the point that how does that drive, a form of government you may want?
Mhm.
Because any policy that's
Yeah.
in place tomorrow can be changed next week.
Next week, sure it can.
So, but
Yeah.
what's your structure of government to determine what those policies ought to be? I think that's the bigger question. And who has the authority to determine who they apply to? Because, policies and procedures that only apply to, certain class of employees. I mean, I assume most of your employees are within collective bargaining units.
Yes.
Mhm.
So that, you have to be conscientious of that when you do any type of, you draft a policy that ultimately only impacts 6 people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
Right.
everything else is governed by a collective bargaining.
I'm just gonna, I just wanted to bring up the charges, because I would suggest from the charges that we are being asked on structural or procedural changes that could enhance the efficiency and productivity of municipal operations. So, so I don't disagree with the fact that, we probably don't wanna get too granular with these. But if there were internal policy changes that we could make, that would make we could suggest that could make the government run more efficiently, I think we have the.
We interviewed 6 departments, and every one of them said, gee, it'd be great if we had a policy that outlines how people are, that may be
Right.
where we need to go.
Where we could go.
Right.
Without having to, go to the treasurer, go to a higher authority to codify it.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll just also say that, training and education is also an area where we could make recommendations, and as well. So there are other levers that we can pull, I guess, is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, I think, training and education, there are procedures, sometimes the people need to be reminded of what the procedures are and how to operate. I mean, it happens all the time, right? And so
Yeah.
part of that training is, I don't know what the training systems are on training new employees, existing employees,
Committee members.
Yeah.
committees.
I mean, the board might, you may have various policies. Well, is a policy that's promulgated by the Board of Selectmen, is that effective with the Water and Sewer Commission? Or do they promulgate different policies because they're in a separate elected board? So you have to be cautious with that, and again, I think you raise a great point, Robin. But, I kind of look at this from my own perspective, and that I always get back to, well, whatever policies and procedures is great, but who's gonna make sure they happen?
Accountability.
Who
Yeah.
has the authority to say? it?
Right.
And who is held accountable for making sure these things actually happen? So, and I confess I overlooked some of this myself in terms of, because I just have a certain perspective that,
Yeah. Of the macro charge.
yes.
Yeah.
We're all victims of our experience, and I'm a victim of my own, so.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I think that's excellent, Robin.
We're moving in the right direction.
yeah.
We're moving in the right direction.
Yes,
We definitely should talk about this when the others are here too.
yes. Yeah, that's a good idea. So, I guess, so, I know we all kind of have our own areas that we're gonna research and report on. Do we let everybody go through once, like we did today, and then, or do we
Come to an ultimate next step?
do that just progressively along the line of time? Or do we wanna solve a problem and then move to the next one? You see what I'm trying to say? I don't know where we go from here.
Well,
Maybe we could do, like she had, like this, can you pull up that one, yeah?
Yeah.
What if we did like executive leadership and then did all of our questioning and stuff for that? Figure out what kind of, I think 1, 2, and 3 on the thing.
Mhm.
Do that for each of them, and then move to the next one, and then when we start executing them, we'll do that in kind of a bulk too.
Because I think that when we say we're gonna look into one, look into two, it's not like you saw one. I mean, it all kind of comes together.
Right.
at the
You have
end.
to, you almost do them
Right.
simultaneously.
Right, because you look at, executive authority, okay, well, that dovetails with, administrative authority,
Right.
which dovetails to realistically, operations of all your departments. That's all part of it.
Yeah, that's why I would
Yeah, so
think
it's
we
a-
would go do 1
Right.
and 2 together and do it for
Right.
each one, and then
So
keep
again, how do
going.
you flesh it out?
Mhm.
Who is it that you feel you need to talk to? What kind of research do you need?
Mhm.
As an example,
Yeah.
you have, multiple departments that would be considered of a public works nature. So what I don't know is to what extent the structure of the town makes, there was a highway department?
Yes.
Over there? How difficult, how does the structure of government impact the highway department and the leadership and the effectiveness of a highway department? And how does the executive administrative authority impact your police department, the good, the bad, the ugly? I think that all kind of plays into the bigger picture, so I think particularly 1 and 2, I think those are big, big nuts. I think the other ones are a little more easier to get your arms around, but I think that the top 2 are, need some thought as to how you pull that apart, but I like the way you
I think,
defined it, Rob.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. One way we could look at this is, where are our bylaws? Where do we think it's most important for us to test this approach, right? And so we could do 2 different ways of testing it. We could pick apart the personnel and HR, sort of, not because we know that that's one that's been on the minds of our constituents, right? We could start to figure out, the process of what questions do we need to ask, of who, and all of that. Or another way would be, to start with executive and administrative management and pick that apart by department, right? And say, we're gonna go out and ask each department head these questions on, around executive leadership and administrative management. And go that way. So there's 2 different next steps we could take. But I do know that there's some additional research that's being had around some things, and that could be informative as well.
I just want to point out, Mr. Chairman, we just lost our quorum,
Okay,
so that's it.
okay,
We have to end the meeting.
all right,
Okay.
that's okay, we did a lot. So we will pick this up next time. Okay,
All right. Can we do an official motion to adjourn,
we should do, okay.
just in case we need that? I know we lost the quorum, but
Motion to adjourn? So moved, seconded, All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.